Hey guys, it's Quills, and in the midst of autumn cloudy weather and warm drinks, we have gathered here today to discuss and explore the art style of Over the Garden Wall. It's one of my favorite comfort shows and biggest creative inspirations. If you weren't aware, Over the Garden Wall was a 10-episode series that released on November 2014 on Cartoon Network. Within the series, protagonist Wirt and his brother Greg venture through the dark unknown forest house with many mysteries along the way. During the production and to this day, it remains as a highly acclaimed series, winning an Emmy for Outstanding Animated Program in 2015. And as much as I do want to go about the achievements, I do want to focus on the fundamental art styles that allowed this show to remain timeless and beautiful to this day. So grab a warm tasty drink and let's get into some rock facts. First off, I'm going in with personal history just so that I think it does explain a lot in the inspiration of Over the Garden Wall if you know a little bit about the creator and his weird love of old things vintage. The creator of Over the Garden Wall is Patrick McHale, who has a long fascination with antique things, old things, and especially silent films, operas, and the 1921 animated short The Flying House. I can link it down below, but definitely is a weird trip if you want to see something old-timey and cool. During one of his big moves, Patrick moved from SoCal to Concord, Massachusetts, where he experienced his preferred aesthetic of clouds, old architecture, taverns, meadows, and historical figures, which I don't really blame him if you see pictures of this town. God damn, it's pretty. This place was also known to home many of its old writers, such as Henry David Thoreau? I don't really know how to say his name, but I hope I'm doing that right. Who's written Walden or Life in the Woods, which greatly inspired the theme of Over the Garden Wall, as many of the lessons emphasize exploring nature and valuing self-reliance, which we see along the way. Another writer that influenced Patrick was Nathaniel Hawthorne, and goddamn that's a cool name. He wrote Young Goodman Brown, which would later become the inspiration of The Beast. During the researching of this video, I read the short story myself, I can link it down below, and goddamn, it is really nostalgic if you've ever dealt with religious guilt like I have. Before we head over the garden wall though, Patrick had his original pitch called The Tome of the Unknown, which had a similar theme but kind of different plot. The plot described two half-brothers, Gregory and Walter, jumping off the wrong train and making a deal with a devil named the Old Scratch. The devil promises to return them home after reading forgotten stories from the book, The Tome of the Unknown. Walter resists, but then signs after his brother already signed. The Old Scratch proceeds to rip the pages from the book and toss them into the air as the two brothers spend each episode retrieving and reliving through each story that they find. So it's kind of like a standalone episode kind of deal, and despite it having a really solid theme and aesthetic in mind, the idea was actually turned down because Patrick was unable to adapt his story into a movie like his network hoped. And I'm going to say, I kind of agree with Patrick here. I don't really know how a pitch like that could be turned into a movie, but what do I know about pitches? From there on, Patrick prioritized other projects as a storyboard artist and writer for The Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack, assisted in the Space Planet pilot, and worked as a creative director for the first 2 seasons of Adventure Time. I don't know if you guys are sensing a theme here with all these art styles, but let's just say you're not right now. And after moving to New York, Patrick was given another chance to pitch a pilot by updating his original story by creating more characters like the Woodsman and Beatrice while emphasizing more dangers of the unknown. And from then on, we got over the garden wall, the rest was history, and that's all how it kind of went down. But I do want to stress the importance of personal history, as now that we kind of know a bit about Patrick, I think you guys can greatly tell where a lot of his inspirations and personal ideas came from, because god, did this man really like old things. And that really does explain a lot of the aesthetic of the show, because it is just filled with like an antique-y fairy tale type of vibe, and that also is with the personal history of Patrick, but also the skills of his team, whose team also really valued a balance between cute and creepy stuff. And now that we understand a bit of the history, let's tackle the actual art style now. So for those who are new, the art fundamentals are the basics of visual art, and I thought it'd be really interesting to go in detail for the show's utilization of each one, starting with anatomy. And anatomy is the display and study of living bodies. I would say like humans, but there's a lot of living things regarded in anatomy, so I'm just gonna say living bodies. If you can tell, Patrick's previous work really influenced the anatomy of the human characters, with noodle limbs, small mouths, simple shape language, nubby fingers, and large heads. In regards to the animals, the exaggeration really comes out in the eyes and humanoid poses, so that a lot of the show's creatures can actually align concisely with the human designs. And as simple as the characters look, many detailed designs had to be scrapped due to the animation limitations. This will be brought up again, by the way, because animation sadly has a lot of art restraints due to the studio guys, but they still did a really good job with the regulations considering they utilized shape language a lot. And for anyone who doesn't know, the shape language is the study of utilizing shapes to convey a certain impression of a character. Like between Wirt and Greg, I think a lot of people can kind of just ground how much mature immature and weird Wirt is, considering he has a lot of conflicting shapes, as opposed to Greg's overall roundness and immaturity. I think the Beast is also a really good example, and the soft human-like body can show an alluring and approachable look, considering he is also very sharp and angular with his antlers and really uncanny wide eyes. So perspective is the study and depth of angles within an artwork, and while the show is pretty simplistic in that sense regarding a lot of the shots focusing characters being eye level for animation, the storyboard and background artists also did a really good job with dramatic shots and blurred spots to show large contrast. And while some of the shots may look skewed and warped, that is all for the sense of dread, as majority of the show actually follows a really realistic setting with slight exaggeration. This does a really good job controlling the eyeline of the viewers, and with the very rare bug eye view, which I don't know what this was trying to showcase, but considering it's filling me with uncomfortability, I think they did a really good job showing that dread. So form is the study of shapes, visual appearance, and configuration of 3D objects, and while the characters look relatively flat compared to the background, I think this actually does a tremendous job in making each scene look like a fairy tale book, and this was one of the inspirations that Patrick referenced. The backgrounds are detailed and painted and textured similar to illustrations of storybooks, and the depth of the background creates visual interest without losing sight of the characters, while they're using cutoffs and scalings of characters to make it believable of the characters actually being in this world. How characters will be cut off, how they'll scale to the background, and with many cartoons there's a line art, and the thin line art for the characters actually does a really good job in giving charm and visual interest to the character while being simplistic. I think overcomplication of line art in the style would confuse the audience a bit, and I don't think it would work really well, so I think the really big contrast between the detailed background and the simple characters is really cute, and I think it does a really good job within the show. Lighting and shadow is the study of, lighting and shadows. And a show as dark and as gritty as Over the Garden Wall, they really mastered this fundamental because it's used to establish moods within the same episode, they set scene tones for different environments, they show large contrasts, and it's really good for the directing the eyeline for important scenes. Cartoon publishing regulations can only show so much, so using dark shadows can also help to shield things that you can't really show, and I really like the subtle dark and light vignettes that really show a certain storybook element. So colors is the use and strength of colors, and if you guys haven't noticed, this show is dark. Like, desaturated, low light, dark, and the palette of the show is very dreary, vintage, old, and natural. You see a lot of greens, yellowish greens, grays, browns, blues, and the occasional warm yellows and red. Any colors not really matching are used in story elements for contrast, like this whole dream sequence scene over here. Considering how different the background and the foreground elements are, I think utilization of the colors is really helpful in this art style because it's the one thing that's really tying everything together, especially with the fact that they had to vary the foreground element colors to match the background. I think it really does a good job in actually making the art style is its own art style, if that makes sense. Composition is the study of layouts and arrangements. Composition for animation is a crucial tool as you don't want to animate anything less important and you really want your work to be seen. And throughout Over the Garden Wall, I will say that the composition is really simplistic, but it is really effective because a lot of the story is important and you really want your characters to focus on it. So eyeline is really important, which is really helpful because you have things like the trees as a framing device, the vignettes as a framing device, the shadows and other perspective tools as a framing device, as well as really simplistic compositions like rule of thirds, L-shapes, circles, diagonals, and centrals. And now that we understand the use of each fundamental, I think it'd be really interesting to show you guys how I would put it all together. So after rewatching a couple of episodes and looking through my notes, I started my piece, and it was kind of a challenge because, as you guys can tell, this is a huge jump from my art style, but here are some things that I picked up. Make sure to have your references because, oh my god, you guys can tell that I use multiple references, and although I kind of just stuck with one, I was still really appreciative to see the other angles the other ones gave me in case I got stuck on anything. I definitely wanted to start on the background first because it was going to take the longest, and I knew that I wanted to add in those like vintage details and focus on the graininess and the old-timey fairy tale-ness of that, and I knew I needed to start on that first so that I wouldn't get stuck on it later. And I think it really did help in tying everything together. I made sure to keep my colors low saturated, and if you guys can tell in the square of color that is the like color wheel whatever thing, I made sure that nothing really got to the like right top corner of the screen because that little square is the area of the most saturation. So I tried to like stay away from there too much. But even for anything that's like high and bright, I made sure to keep it on the left end, which is basically low saturation but still like high toned, if that makes sense. I made sure to make as many dramatic shadows as I can with the foreground element, trees, and I made sure to give her a really big shadow. I use a lot of painterly, textured, and like pencily brushes for the background. Like we discussed, the background is very, very complex with texture. I don't know if you guys knew this, but Nick Cross, the show's actual background artist, has a really cool Tumblr post of how he made the illustrations for the show. So I'm gonna link it down below if you guys actually want to see a good tutorial of how he did the backgrounds, but I did my best. But I really do recommend looking at his first because I think it'd be really helpful to show. Despite loving line art, I decided not to do the line art in the background because I wanted to actually challenge myself in making the background more painterly. So after I basically did the background, I made sure to add a texture overlay to make it more of a storybook feel to help break it up from the character. The character, I kind of loosely based off myself, but I made sure to keep the art style in mind with like the round eyes, the noodle limbs, the big heads, the old Victorian style clothing, and a thin black liner with no line weight, which was really freaking hard if you guys know me. And obviously I had to add a really dramatic shadow so that it would all look together. I was really proud of this, I'm gonna be honest. I really think it does fit the art style of the show, and I can now headcanon myself within A Lost Soul in the Unknown. I think it's really cute. I can't really think of what to name this piece, but I hope you guys found this helpful if you guys want to play around with the art style too. Over the Garden Wall is a gorgeous series, okay? Like, the characters are cute and adorable and clear, the backgrounds look like paintings, the use of shadows and light could be its own art course, I'm gonna be honest, and the entire show reads like a really beautiful cautionary tale. Personally, I think this is exactly the vibe that Patrick and his team were aiming for, and I really think they completely nailed it because holy cow. I haven't even gotten to the amazing plot and the character arcs, but maybe that's for something for you to watch or rewatch for yourself. Again, I love this show to death and I will never stop recommending it, so I hope you guys enjoyed this detailed art style analysis of Over the Garden Wall. See you guys next time, bye!